Welcome to bath time. So when you're browsing around the internet and you're reading articles on Canadian teams or anything related to Canadian teams or anything related to American teams, the National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, NFL, football, perhaps something about your local fire department and something they're doing to help the community, you're going to find Canadian fans arguing over which team sucks more. And so I really, in all honesty, I don't understand the arguments because honestly, since 1993, nobody has anything to be all proud of. Now, yes, Calgary fans are going to say, hey, in 2004, we got hosed, that puck was in the net, and in 2006, other fans can say, hey, we got to the Stanley Cup Finals, and in 2011, Canucks fans can say, well, we got to the Stanley Cup Finals against Boston. And then, if you're looking to the previous Stanley Cups, then if you're in Calgary, you can say, well, we had it in 1989. If you're in Edmonton, you can say we had it in 1990. If you're in Montreal, you can say it's 1993. If you're in Toronto, you can say 1967. And if you're in Ottawa, you can say basically 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago. And if you're Vancouver, you can say, do the millionaires count? And the answer is no. Just like the Stanley Cup from 100 years ago doesn't count. And if you're the Jets, you say, we have a really nice jersey and logo. And there is no Stanley Cup. But if you're Winnipeg, you can say, hey, we had the Avco Cup champs, and if not for the NHL hosing us when we came in the league the first time, we could have been, a Stanley Cup contender, but they hosed us in terms of who they allowed us to keep in 1979. So it's on the NHL. The thing that drives me absolutely mental, though, when I'm reading all these comments is simple. So if you're a Calgary fan, you're going to hear a lot of chirping about, Lucic and trades and bad trades being made. If you're Edmonton, you're going to hear how, well, no Stanley Cup since 1990 and losing all these games, and eventually McDavid's going to want out. McDavid's going to want a better team. And then there was comments about contracts until Draisaitl got a lot better, and then those contract discussions went away. Thank you, Peter Chiarelli. Not that anybody will give him credit for that. Same thing in Boston, where as soon as he was fired, everybody went, Chiarelli sucks. And I'm like, wait, Chiarelli made some decent moves, though, in Boston. But it's fine, he sucks. Montreal, of course, there's the Patrick Waugh curse that's out there that you can throw out there. But, today, for instance, I'm watching as the number one snipers would appear to be, I will say, between Toronto and Montreal. And this is precious. This is a feud between two original six teams. One that's had a hard time getting into the playoffs. Another one that's had a hard time getting into the playoffs. One that has a really proud history of a lot of Stanley Cups, and another one that has a really proud history of a lot of Stanley Cups. And yes, Toronto's history is further in the past. No, I wasn't born when they won that last Stanley Cup. Knock that off. But the reality is, since 1993, there hasn't been a Stanley Cup in Montreal. The drought is up to 27 years, which absolutely unthinkable that it would reach that level. And then, of course, Vancouver being the most recent, people are going to say, oh, the riots, you burned the city down. Okay, they didn't burn the city down. That's not even close to reality. And B, the one thing that's forgotten about that is that the city of Vancouver came together after that, and the cleanup effort was fantastic. And as a community, everybody said, you know what, this is unacceptable. That was on a world stage. And since then, the city hasn't been on fire in 9 years so far. So, fingers crossed. And of course, 94 made it look even worse for Vancouver, right? The Vancouver Canucks, of course, their great shame, 0-3 in the Stanley Cup Finals. And that is not the kind of record you want to have, being 0-3 in the Stanley Cup Finals. And of course, going into the Stanley Cup Final in 2011. I'll say that Canuck fans were very confident they beat the Bruins. I was not. I thought it was a very even series as a fan of both teams. And I do wonder sometimes if maybe Vancouver thought, we've got this is ours. And maybe they didn't put their foot down when they needed to, and Boston saw that opening, and then they just kicked that door wide open, and they knocked them over. The interesting thing to me is when I see fans in Canada arguing over which organization is worse, It's bizarre to me because there hasn't been a Stanley Cup in Canada since 1993. Oh, but right, that's all Gary Bettman's fault. It's all Gary Bettman's fault that none of these teams have been run well enough to win a Stanley Cup. And that's my opinion. People can have other opinions, that's fine. But I have a hard time finding a team that, yes, Ottawa, they were in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2007. They were against a better team in the Anaheim Ducks. Toronto hasn't been to the Stanley Cup Finals since 1967. There isn't a year that you can look at 93 and say, hey, if not for that incident with Gretzky, yeah, and they had a chance to redeem themselves after that incident, and they didn't. And that's just sadly, that's how hockey works. I remember Nashville in 2017 in the finals. Controversial call didn't go their way. Pittsburgh wins the Stanley Cup. Last year, there was a controversial call that didn't go Boston's way. St. Louis wins the Stanley Cup. Every fan base deals with this, where there's a call that's missed or a call that's made that shouldn't have been, and it does affect the outcome. But again, teams overcome those or they don't. I get asked in every live stream, which Canadian team's going to be next to win the Stanley Cup? I like Winnipeg's chances best out of all of them because, they kind of tore their defense apart a little bit. First, they took out Trouba, and then Byfuglien said, I'm staying at home eating nachos, and that's fine, and I mean, I may be oversimplifying it, but basically Byfuglien didn't want to play anymore. And yet they still stay in the hunt, and they look pretty darn good at a lot of points this year. And they've got cap space. So for Toronto, I would love to see Toronto win a Stanley Cup just to silence all of the 1967 talk, just to finally end the talk of some kind of a conspiracy existing to make hockey teams in Canada hire bad general managers or make bad trades or do the wrong things or go into rebuilds like Ottawa has or deny rebuilds for years like Toronto did. Or Calgary did that too, where they were just mediocre. Was it the NHL keeping them mediocre while they refused to go into an actual rebuild? Did the NHL make them hold on to Iginla for too long when they probably should have moved him earlier? Did the NHL make the Oilers make really bad decisions and keep hiring former Oilers who maybe weren't the best choice for managers, coaches, scouts, whatever role they had may not have been the best choice? They seem to be making choices based on their emotional attachment to the past, and they were making decisions based on, hey, this was our dynasty, and these are the guys who are the face of that dynasty, so it would be great if we could get back to that. Well, who better to build it than the guys who were in it? It doesn't always work that way. It worked well for Montreal way back. It did. It worked very well for Montreal. I think of like Toe Blake as a good example. But it doesn't always work. Now, if any of these teams are going to get to Stanley Cup finals, they have to be elite level teams for a while. And Vancouver's the most recent one that you could say had that elite status with back-to-back President's trophies. My answer to that has been I always saw parts of their lineup that I was concerned with, whether it was a lack of finish. A lot of the times I've mentioned this in videos as well, that I felt like when the momentum shifted against Vancouver, they didn't make the adjustments necessary to shift that momentum back. That was the failing I thought of Alain Vigneault, was that he just didn't make those in-game adjustments or game-to-game in playoff series adjustments needed to be a champion. But it is bizarre because there is this very vocal, and I'm going to say minority, of fans that want to snipe every other Canadian franchise for being poorly run. And not only that, but then if that doesn't work, then they want to say, well, my team hasn't won a cup because there's this grand master plan to make sure that we don't. And I've never seen it. Definitely when the Flames traded Gilmore to Toronto and Toronto got a lot better, it's not like the NHL made that work. And then when they didn't win a cup with Gilmore, it's not that the NHL kiboshed them winning the Stanley Cup. The interesting part too is this. So you have 7 teams in Canada, generate a lot of revenue. You don't have problems with attendance. I'll just cover up Ottawa a little bit on that. But you don't have problems with the attendance in 6 out of 7 cities. And if Ottawa's run well, and if they become a playoff contender again, I think the fans will come back. I do. But the overall picture in Canada is one that generates revenues for the NHL. It is not in the NHL's best interests to deny a Stanley Cup to Canadian teams. But also, the Canadian dollar isn't controlled by the National Hockey League. The Canadian dollar is a big driving factor. I mentioned a video yesterday. $81.5 million is your salary cap. In American dollars, now that is $110 million Canadian. That was as of yesterday when I used the online calculator for transitioning from US to Canadian dollars. That's a huge difference. And not only that, but there are players who maybe when they're free agents, they don't want to sign in Canadian cities for tax reasons. There are a lot of reasons why Canadian teams have struggled. And I do think there's been poor management in a number of these organizations that's definitely hurt it. But I do find it strange when I see, and again, I'll take that arrow out, because it's not just fans of Toronto and Montreal going at each other. You've got fans in Calgary and Edmonton that go at each other. Everybody goes after the Canucks, because sure, Senators are an easy target. On some level, the Leafs are a very easy target. But what you start realizing when you start getting into that kind of terminology is they're all easy targets, because nobody's won anything since 1993. So when I see, oh, look at those Leafs, they haven't won anything since 67. Yeah, Oilers haven't won anything since 90. Flames, 89. 93 for these guys in Vancouver? Nope. They rebranded how many times? Never won them a cup. And for the Senators, again, you have to look back almost 100 years to find a Stanley Cup with Ottawa's name on it, and that was not the franchise that they are currently. And for Winnipeg, trying to get to that next level is something that they've done with this team now that they inherited from Atlanta, and something they struggled to do with the Winnipeg Jets, the original Jets, who moved to Arizona, and they haven't made anything of it in Arizona either. There are not a lot of organizations that are able to build a sustainable winner and win a lot of Stanley Cups. The Detroit Red Wings come to mind in the modern era. The Chicago Blackhawks come to mind in the modern era. The Kings had those 2 cup wins in 3 years. There was lightning in a bottle in 2012, and then experience took them back in 2014. I do hope that we get a Canadian Stanley Cup winner, and I'm to the point where I don't really care which team it is. Now, if you'd asked me before I had a channel, well, which teams do you think you'd like to see win a Stanley Cup? I would add Vancouver at number 1, obviously. Ottawa at number 2. Again, that's kind of obvious. And Winnipeg at number 3. I would have said those would be my favorites if they were going to win it. And again, they've never won it before, right? But right now, I really wouldn't care who it was. Because it is a narrative that's just... It's really easy to look at Montreal being the last Stanley Cup winner and say, well, the NHL has it out for Canada. It doesn't. There's a lot of bad management decisions, and I have no problem with, and you guys can let me know in the comment section below if you want me to do this, going through the National Hockey League from 1993 until now. Look at the standings, look at the playoffs, and look at every single Canadian team and where the failings show up and where they fall out, because it's not a matter of the NHL being against Canadian teams. It's been, like I said, it's been economic. It's been players signing elsewhere, players wanting those long-term contracts south of the border. And one thing that's changed, one thing that is in favor of these franchises currently is that seems to be going away. Players are staying in one organization longer, it seems. And we're starting to see some stability when it comes to players signing long-term contracts in cities that... Edmonton never had long-term contracts in the early 90s. That just wasn't a thing. And if they were, either they were brought in from another organization, or it wasn't your big star key player. And there were a lot of players the Oilers had that were pretty darn good, and they just couldn't keep them when they wanted money. Now, whether that was Pocklington being cheap, Canadian dollar being nothing, whatever it was at the time, they just couldn't keep it together. So hopefully at some point, this video doesn't need to be done. Every year I talk about the Canadian drought, and I have no problem with going through season by season. But I would like to know from you guys what you think about, how to approach that, and just, no, don't, or do. And we can look through each year and say, all right, these teams were contenders that year, and this is where it fell. And, because again, I think it's been a lot of mismanagement in Canada more than anything else. And again, if you're a Canadian hockey fan, like, if you're an Oilers fan, you want to say, oh, I'm going to make fun of the Canucks. Okay. Canucks fan, you want to make fun of anybody? Good on you. And again, on this board, I don't think there's a whole lot of reasons for fans to crow right now. It's been almost a decade since a Canadian team was in the Stanley Cup Finals. So, yeah, bragging rights are becoming less and less of a thing. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.